Alright, welcome to the Trade Game channel. This is Daniel. It's January the 16th, and we are talking about trading Ethereum. Which is a cryptocurrency. We are grid trading Ethereum, and we are going long, so we want to, our bot is going to be opening long positions and trading the volatility of Ethereum as it moves up and down, but it will specifically be opening longs where the contracts will be buying with the expectation of selling at a higher price. Now, we're going to be starting this bot with a higher level of leverage compared to some of our other ones, 30 times leverage. And accordingly, we're going to need to sort of be careful about this, because if the bot is going to start opening longs at a certain price level, it's going to have a liquidation value down below that, and with if it's opening longs with 30 times leverage, its liquidation value is not going to be too far below where the price action currently is. And so if we open this bot and have it start trading and opening longs, and then the price suddenly takes a nosedive, the bot may well hit liquidation, and that would be a wash. We would lose all of our money, and it would be unfortunate. We're not looking for that outcome. We're looking to have this bot going hopefully for a long period of time. But in order to have these bots going for a long period of time, they need to be able to run successfully and trade back and forth on a grid, the currency that you're trying to trade, for a little while in order to build up some little profits, some little margin in the bot to extend its liquidation value to lower levels so that it can safely trade down to those levels. So that being the case, we need to start these bots as if we were starting a long position. With 30 times leverage, it would not be a swing trade, it would be a scalp trade, which means we're going to need to look at this at a fairly close time frame. We had previously talked about starting this bot a little while ago, and unfortunately we did not hit our activation level. As I think I discussed in a previous video, we had been looking at this. We were expecting Ethereum to do well over the next week or so, and so we wanted to go long on it, and we still are, essentially. And I had predicted that this downwards price action might find the peak of its dip at around this time. And as I discussed before, I had made a mistake, or looking back on this. Of course, it's always more apparent when you're looking back on things what happened. And my methodology appeared to be pretty legit, pretty much pretty sound, or at least reasonably sound. But I had expected us to sort of hit right around this general area. And so I had set a trigger price at about that point, I think. And unfortunately, we just never swung quite far enough down to catch the trigger price. We almost got there a couple of times. So if I had set that trigger price just a little bit higher, we would have gotten into a long position with the bot, and as you can see, that would have done rather well at this point. But that's okay. We can always trade another day, which is what we're trying to do now. So, it's perfectly fine to miss a trade like this, by the way, when you're doing this sort of thing. If it doesn't hit the entry point that you want to get into, or if it goes down, it's perfectly fine. You always have another chance to trade. What you don't want is to enter recklessly and then have it go the wrong direction, and then you're in trouble. So just missing out on an entry point for a trade is really not a big deal at all. Not something to stress over in the slightest, in my experience. So we're going to have to take another look at this one, because we did not get our activation level the other day. So what do we think is happening in the broader market, and what do we think is happening in Ethereum? Okay, looking at a higher time scale now, looking at the one-day charts. We had a very bullish November going into December for Ethereum, and then we had a correction downwards in December. And some people had said or thought that the bottom of this correction was kind of around here, around December, like late December. Of course, I mean, really, say here would be the bottom, but we'll see. But we're sort of expecting, I guess my point is that we're sort of expecting bullish movement in Ethereum and Bitcoin coming up here in the bigger picture. But Bitcoin's RSI is a little on the high side. And let's see, well, I mean, let's kind of see where we're at in terms of our RSI for Ethereum. Yeah, kind of like some of these other coins that we're looking at right now. Ethereum's RSI on the daily chart has got a nice short signal going on here, indicating this might be a good time, perhaps, to enter a short if you wanted to, with higher leverage. That isn't what we're looking to do, however. So that's not of much use to us, although it might be to somebody. But of course, the RSI does not necessarily always cleanly swing from high to low and low to high. Sometimes it will go high and then go a little bit and then go high again, and you just have to wait and see what happens. But at least in terms of the relative strength index, we are kind of looking, and Bitcoin is looking much the same way. Like, we've gotten overbought, and it's probably kind of time for us to correct downwards a little bit yet again. And so what we are now looking to do, since we missed this upwards leg, is we're going to try to catch this as it corrects downwards and hopefully catch a dip in a reasonable way. The problem that we're going to sort of run into with this bot is that we can't be terribly cavalier about where we set the activation point, because we need to try to catch the dip at a reasonably low point in the dip. Although we do, again, expect reasonably bullish movement going forward, it does look, at least locally, just looking at the regular candles, it does look like we had a big upwards wick here, maybe starting a downwards movement here. It's possible we found a peak here, and we could always find another one, but we'll just kind of have to see. And we may be due for a more significant correction to the downside soon, perhaps close to where I have this line set right now, 3,500. I may have set that as a possible activation level previously to see if we could kind of jump on board with this movement, this bullish movement again, but it looks like it just didn't get down to that level, which is a bit of a shame because it would have been doing all right so far. But what I would kind of expect now, after this period of bullish movement, would be a consolidation phase where this has a turn to the downside for a little while. So if that is what's going to be happening here, then we'll look at it from that perspective. So how do we decide where we're going to set our trigger price for this one? Because this is a higher leverage one. I'm going to be a little more conservative about this. Oh, I see. Days. Because it is higher leverage, and I don't want it. If I set a relatively liberal trigger price for this one, it may correct down too far and liquidate the bot. So I really don't want that to happen. What I'm going to do is we're going to review some of our indicators here that don't really give me any information that isn't already present in the charts, but can be useful as a tool to just make it easier. Like instead of me having to identify and draw boxes for these support and resistance levels, the automatic indicator can do that for me. And it just as a great time saving tool. So we are looking to have some resistance around $4,100. Are we going back up that high? Maybe, but might take a minute to actually get up there. Then we have some support kind of in this area where we had tried to enter our long before around $3,400. So this has not given us a tremendous amount to work with in terms of on the daily chart, picking out an area. That would be a good trigger price. Just off the top of my head, the most obvious place to place the trigger would be at the top of this band of support, around $3,400, right around the place where we had actually talked about entering before. And we may indeed be able to enter at that point again. Now, if it does happen to occur that the price action goes down that far, but we will just have to sort of see. We do have, let me take off the resistance. We do have some areas here of fair trade gaps from this bullish movement right here and also right here, and neither of these have been satisfied yet at all for Ethereum. And the market does tend to like to satisfy these fair trade gaps at least a little bit. Not always, but at least you see some of these were never really filled in. This one just barely was. This one was. And so this is a thing that you can kind of use as a tool. This one, no, because that's the bottom of it. Yes, here, it was satisfied right here by this peak. And so trading this on a short term, on a higher, on a smaller time frame, if I was trading with higher leverage and I would be shorting it for Ethereum, I might start shorting at this price. We're currently at like 3,675 or 76 or something, with a target of 3,572, in hopes that perhaps the price action will correct downwards as the RSI is very high right now, and come down here to satisfy this fair trade gap and fill in this liquidity of these in the market, or these leftover orders and things down here. And so I would set my target kind of at the top of this fair trade gap, hoping that the price action may fill it in. That's just an example of a scalping type trade that you could do. But those are, remember, riskier trades. Price action could always do something completely different. If you're going to do that sort of thing, do please be careful and set stop losses, and perhaps around $3,700, $3,745 might be an okay stop loss for this. But it depends on if you're willing to tolerate the short going into considerable amount of loss. If you really think that it's going to go straight down to the fair value gap, you could set it much closer, like $3,700 or something. And then if it goes the other way, it just goes the other way, and you lose a little bit of money, but not a whole lot if you set it fairly close like that. It is up to you. This may form a second high before correcting down. That does happen. Sometimes we'll get a double top when you have a peak like this. That's always something that could happen. And if you do enter a short right now, that might mess up your short. So you could either set a stop loss that's pretty close, and then if it goes up and forms a double top, you'll lose a little bit of money, but you can still restart your short at the second peak if you want to. Or you could try setting a stop loss that's kind of somewhere up here, above this wick, and just if you are willing to tolerate having the price go up and your short possibly going into loss and hanging out in a state of loss for a little while. But it's also entirely possible that the price action might just keep going up, and if you're shorting it, then you would stop loss out and you'd lose a greater portion of the money you put into that scalp trade than you would if you set a tight stop loss. So it's all about risk management when it comes to any type of trading, really. And so I would exercise caution. But we are doing grid trading, though, and what we're doing right now is looking for an entry point for our bot. After that, we will stop supervising it, and the bot will sort of have to survive or not survive on its own without any interference on my part, aside from potentially closing it if I think it's getting into trouble or if I think it needs to be closed. So that is assuming that we think that. So if we do think that it's going to correct down and it's going to get through and try to touch this lower fair value gap, we could set a trigger price somewhere. I'm interested in somewhere around there. And I must have set that based off of an area of support. Yeah, from a previous from previous price action. So that's probably a pretty reasonable place to set that. Let me look and see what our supply and demand indicator might have to say about all of this. Not a whole lot, really. Kind of a similar sort of thing. Got an area of interest right around here, but that's a little higher up than I would like to see. Again, we are doing this bot, and we are going long, and with fairly high leverage. So this might not be a bad place to set an entry point, but I want to see more how the price action develops if I'm going to set it this high up. Probably, maybe not. We'll see. This can always change. But let's go down to the 4-hour time frame and see what levels might pop out at us. Interesting. 4-hour time frame, kind of seeing the same sort of thing. Showing us an area of support a little bit higher up this time than it was previously. Not a whole lot else of particular interest, I don't think, here, though. And the fair value gaps will probably be kind of similar. Yeah. There is a nice big one right there. It does sort of seem like the market will want to fill that one. Let's go down to the 1 hour and take a look and see, since we are talking about a relatively high leverage trade, what we could perhaps be seeing here. So in the bigger time frame, we're thinking this is going to range down a little bit, and it may get down to here, but we also have some pretty chunky fair value gaps in this area and an area of support being marked out by our support and resistance channel indicator. It's interesting. What I may do, I'm seeing sort of a confluence of indicators here around this area, around sort of 3,500. On the 1 hour. And so what we could consider doing, so sort of in this range right here, What we could consider doing is placing um, our trigger price kind of closer to $3,500, right about there. Since we are bullish on this coin overall, we do think that it's going to perform well over the next couple of months. Me hypothesizing that it might correct downwards is speculative and only a short-term price movement in any event. So setting it sort of at about $3,500 level, I don't think would be unreasonable, and we could perhaps move it up to a little closer to this like $3,550 level, depending on how the price action evolves over the next couple of days. Because we are going to have to kind of wait a little bit. We were not able to catch this nice big swing up the way we wanted to, and so now is the time to be patient and wait for another dip to sort of present itself to us. We can also look at our oscillators and kind of try to gauge this from that. Let's see. We were already looking at this one. Kind of looks like it might be starting an upwards pattern here, but on the Heikinashi, and we do think that this is going to be an upwards pattern overall. And remember, this is on the daily time frame, but it doesn't mean that it won't necessarily. It may come down and challenge this 10 EMA a little bit. In which case, if anything, we need to move the activation price up a little bit. But we'll kind of see how that unfolds. I think I don't want to get into anything too prematurely. If you look at this from an oscillator standpoint, we've had some terrifically long periods of upwards movement, and then we had a long period of bullish movement. And so where are we going to end up with our next one? Well, this period in November and going through December was a little bit unusual. It's in terms of like the sort of normal ranging pattern for Ethereum. And so depending on what happens in the news, or if we get a lot of unusual movement or disturbance in the market, it's more likely we're going to go back to a shorter pattern, I would think, than it is to expect the market to continue with these really prolonged abnormal waveforms. So that being the case, it'd be difficult to really set a repeating pattern from out here and then expect it to be accurate on the other side, in my opinion. Although you can, if I set it up like this, it is at least the right width apart. And so, okay. As a like a really, I'll have to use this with I think a huge grain of salt though, and maybe more use it just to kind of visualize where things might happen over the next few days rather than taking it as gospel, especially since I'm really guesstimating quite heavily. So, if we think that Ethereum might correct perhaps to the downside soon, and we think that it may be at around perhaps this time, we don't. How can we decide where this might go? Well, if we're going to take this as a rough time that we want to enter, perhaps a little before then, might be better. I was going to take a peek at this one just for funsies. Yeah, that's also showing indicating that it might be a good time to look for a short. This is a standard, relatively standard indicator that should be available on pretty much any exchange's charting system as a technical indicator. It's called the no sure thing indicator. Been around for a little while, and the way you read this, when the green line goes up like this, and the red line goes up in tandem with it in a nice clean way, and the green line intersects and crosses to the downside over the red line, that is a suggestion that this might be a good time to enter into a short. If this was happening on the inverse, below this dotted line, then that would be an indication to enter a long. Usually the way I would use this is when it has a signal like this to enter a short, I typically would not enter a short right after seeing this intersection. Usually what I do is I start looking for a good entry point for a short after this, because often this thing will give a signal for a short like this or a long like this, and then the better opportunity to enter a short will come a little bit afterwards. And so entering perhaps on this candle wouldn't have been all that bad. Or if it has another little movement to the upside, you might try to catch a good high entry price for a short, expecting it to go down, if you were so inclined. But, okay. So we've got a level kind of set based off support and resistance, although there are so many options sometimes with that, it can be a little bit tricky to try and figure out what could happen. We don't really have like a channel that we can use, I don't think, as we did before, that would be super useful in this case. So what we may need to do is just go with the support and resistance levels and kind of wait and see where price action happens, how the price action goes, to kind of speculate on where this might end up out in the future. If I just draw a line straight across to here down to where that feels a little bit far to me. It might be more like this. But since we don't really have a good, clear indication of like one direction in the price action here, it's kind of hard to extrapolate out, really, honestly. So this may be a time when we could see a bottom right down here, but I'd kind of have a feeling it might be a tiny bit earlier than that. And as to where that level might end up, I think it's going to just be sort of hard to tell, really. You could view this as just sort of a waveform and try to make an approximate pattern. Oh gosh, that feels awfully awkward, but that being the case, this still intersects with the kind of approximate time that we were looking at, right around the point that we had set our proposed activation level. So it doesn't really tell us a whole lot, I don't think, in terms of something that might be useful. Except that it might, if anything, go down a little bit lower by the time it reaches that. But again, I don't know that this my attempt at predicting what time the next wave is going to occur is going to be accurate in the slightest. So this may be completely wrong. But we'll have to kind of see. We'll kind of have to see. So I think that for the time being, what we're going to do is we're going to reset the trigger for this Ethereum bot to be lower than it currently was, because I'm worried that it will have a correction to the downside and it'll get liquidated if I just leave it where it is. And we're going to hope that it's going to correct downwards a bit here for a little while after this recent bullish movement, this recent pump in price. And we're going to set this at $3,511.18 until I say otherwise. I may, depending on how the price action is going, move this to a higher level at some point sooner. I'd rather set it, though, too low than set it too high, as this bot is going to be entering longs. And if I set it too high and the price action moves down too far after the bot starts opening long positions, it may just liquidate out immediately, and I'll just lose the money that I have used to set up the bot. And that's an adverse outcome. We don't want that. So I'm going to try to avoid that possibility. All right. So those are my thoughts on where Ethereum may be heading over the next couple of days, at least for a little bit. I don't know that I'm going to be able to make these videos daily, but I'll certainly try to keep up with them as best I can. Yeah, so this is the Trade Game channel, and I am Daniel, and it is, it was January 6th, now it's January 7th. Please like and subscribe. It helps to grow our community. God be with you. Please, everyone, be good to one another, and I will talk to you later.